This story is a work of fiction. Lanius flies silently. Chapter 2. Sunday, April 11th, 2021, 12 p.m. K University Student Dining Hall. The campus dining hall at noon on a Sunday. It operated 365 days a year. Even on major holidays tucked between long weekends, they served simple meals to sustain the few students who remained in the dorms or essentially lived in their labs. However, there weren't many of them. On weekends and holidays, the dining hall was eerily quiet, as if the usual weekday cacophony of chattering voices and clattering silverware had been completely washed away. In that vast, desolate hall, at a fixed table in the most secluded corner, Soo-in Han sat completely isolated from the outside world, just as she always was. With an expressionless face, she was methodically slicing the pork cutlet on her tray into uniform pieces and placing them in her mouth, like injecting essential fuel into a precision machine. Her remarkably low extroversion and neuroticism acted as an impenetrable shield, preventing the apocalyptic chaos of the outside world from breaching the tranquility of her secluded corner. From the entrance of that silent sanctuary, Sia Ryu burst onto the scene like a hurricane, her heavy panting shattering the stillness. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead and the bridge of her nose. Stray hairs cascaded messily from her leopard print claw clip. It was the aftermath of pedaling a bicycle like a maniac for 40 minutes straight, taking the warm midday spring breeze head-on while navigating a gray city where communication networks were severed and cars had ground to a halt. Panting heavily at the entrance, Sia rapidly scanned the room. The moment she spotted Soo-in's familiar silhouette steadily chewing her food in the farthest corner, she charged forward without hesitation. Clatter! Bang! She roughly pulled out the chair opposite Soo-in and flopped down. She unleashed a fiery energy onto the table, a potent cocktail of her high extroversion and an obsessive epiphany about survival. Breathing heavily and with a wild gleam in her eyes, Sia slammed her fist onto the table. Soo-in? Gold. It's all about gold. The table shuddered slightly, but Soo-in didn't so much as flinch. Completely unfazed by the noisy fervor radiating from Sia, she swallowed her bite of pork cutlet, shifted her gaze and her fork to the next target, and replied with infinite serenity. I'm eating. Stop kicking up dust. That detached response was a familiar pattern established 9 years ago. Shrugging off her friend's completely unfazed demeanor, Sia leaned intensely over the table. Throwing her arms wide in an exaggerated gesture as if depicting the end of the world, she began a passionate, spittle-flying tirade. Dust is the least of our problems. The times are demanding gold. Look at the state of the world right now. The global financial grid is wiped out, inflation is skyrocketing, and companies are going bankrupt left and right. Fiat currency is going to be nothing more than scrap paper. In times like this, it's all about the absolute safe haven asset that has never lost its value in the entirety of human history. Unquestionably, it's gold. Having discovered a flawless survival formula after trembling in sheer terror just moments ago, Saya's eyes sparkled like a prophet who had unearthed a world-saving truth. However, her grandiose macroeconomic manifesto was shot down in a single second by Soo-in's brutally realistic and logical reality check, delivered as she dabbed her mouth with a napkin. I get that gold is great, but I don't have any money to buy it. The majestic symphony that had been blaring triumphantly in Saya's head abruptly cut out. Her eyes wavered. The grim reality of her friend's bank account flashed through her mind. Soo-in had just earned her PhD in February, but because the world had gone to hell, she had neither research funding nor viable job prospects. The euphoria of discovering the world's most infallible safe asset cooled rapidly in the face of the painful reality. There was no capital to invest. Instantly, grand survival schemes were replaced by a profound empathy and pity for her jobless friend. Frowning so hard her eyebrows formed a steep slope, looking as if she might burst into tears at any moment, Sia spoke in a heartbreakingly tender voice. Oh right, our Soo-in just graduated and doesn't have an income. I was out of my mind. What the hell was I thinking with gold? Are you even eating properly? She was momentarily broken by harsh reality. Instead, her high agreeableness and neuroticism kicked in, shifting her mode to a deep, agonizing concern for the friend quietly emptying her tray right in front of her. Methodically slicing her cutlet with her knife and fork, Soo-in replied in a flat, monotone voice. I don't understand the logic of asking someone if they are eating properly while you're literally watching them eat a meal. Shot down once again by Suin's ruthless, factual dissection that pinpointed the logical fallacy of her touching moment of pity, Sia rested her chin in her hands. Looking at Suin with affectionate eyes, she pouted slightly in embarrassment but fired back warmly. Well, I see you for lunch today, but I was wondering if you were pulling all-nighters all the time. When you pull all-nighters, you just survive on instant noodles. Turning her head to soothe her awkwardness, Sia's gaze landed on the faded menu board on the cafeteria wall. The moment she scanned the numbers, her instincts, honed by years of dealing with production costs and profit margins, reacted violently. Her eyes went wide, and she let out an astonished gasp. Wow! With food ingredient costs skyrocketing everywhere else, meals have doubled in price, but the prices here are exactly the same. I want to eat all my meals here from now on. Keeping her eyes fixed on the cutlet, Suin replied. But do you even have the time to come all the way here to eat? At that cold slap of reality, Sia's shoulders slumped, like a balloon rapidly deflating. The crushing reality that her prestigious corporate ID badge had essentially become worthless scrap paper weighed heavily on her chest. Leaning her upper body over the table as if collapsing, she let out a whiny groan. Ugh, there's no way I can make it here during a short lunch break. If we had 2 or 3 hours for lunch like some countries, I'd totally come here. Come to think of it, the company cafeteria doubled its prices compared to last month. And they said they're cutting the meal subsidy completely next month, so it's going to go up even more. Just as the suffocating complaints of a corporate wage slave began to subside, Suin, having finished her meal, lightly wiped her mouth with a napkin. Then, in a tranquil tone as casual as commenting on the clear weather, she dropped a bombshell. Sungwoon Electronics really is past its prime. By the way, I just got scouted by Raptor Dynamics. Zap! In an instant, as if a massive electrical current had surged up her spine, Sia bolted upright. Her severely suppressed extroversion ignited brighter than the flash of a scarab explosion, and her pupils dilated massively. Seriously? Isn't that the Cobalt Group subsidiary that supposedly doesn't even know what a recession is, even while the rest of the world is going under? Suin lifted her water glass, took a sip, and replied calmly. Yeah, the aerial drone manufacturer under Cobalt Group. Overwhelming joy and deep emotion bloomed on Sia's face, as if it were her own achievement. Clasping her hands together as if in prayer, her eyes sparkling, her unique energy, capable of empathizing with another's happiness deeper than anyone else, warmed the air in the corner of the cafeteria. Whoa! Is our Suin finally going to a massive conglomerate like Cobalt to let her genius fully blossom? Wow, this calls for a serious celebration. Lunch is on me today. Wait, no, coffee is on me. However, unlike Sia, who looked thrilled enough to own the world, there was zero joy or anticipation on the face of the person actually receiving the offer. In fact, Suin's brow furrowed ever so slightly, perhaps by a single millimeter. Holding her cup in one hand and staring into empty space, she murmured in a chillingly subdued voice. But I have a bad feeling about this. Suin quietly set down her cup. Still in that cold, dry tone, she revealed the contents of the email she had checked. I got an email this morning from the intelligence division at Raptor Dynamics telling me to come in for an interview immediately. But they said the scope of the work is classified and will only be disclosed on-site on the day of the interview. Hearing the unfamiliar division name, Sia leaned her upper body further across the table. For someone whose professional life had revolved entirely around factory production lines and cost calculations, the organizational structure of a massive defense contractor sounded somewhat alien. Her intense curiosity triggered, she blinked rapidly. Intelligence. Does that mean they do something like artificial intelligence? Staring fixedly at Sia with an unwavering gaze, Suin began to deconstruct the core nature of the word with cold logic and reason. No. Rather than artificial intelligence. Traditionally, intelligence refers to the comprehensive acquisition and analysis of information through espionage, surveillance, and reconnaissance. For a drone company to commercialize that, it implies they manufacture, sell, or manage drones used for spying and surveillance. Taken a step further, they might professionally conduct the espionage or surveillance themselves and sell the acquired intelligence. At that stage, it might involve artificial intelligence, espionage, surveillance, selling intelligence. The moment those cold, shady words dropped, Sia rubbed her arms and shuddered. She scrunched up her face in blatant disgust. Endowed with profound empathy and a warm heart toward people, coupled with instincts that reacted hypersensitively to even minor threats, she immediately experienced a visceral rejection of the negative connotations of those words. Ugh. Espionage? Surveillance? Like, secretly spying on people and digging up their dirt? Ah, that seriously gives me the creeps. Soo-in, absolutely do not go to a department that does shady stuff like that. Watching her friend express genuine revulsion out of concern for her, Soo-in took another sip of water before her throat went dry. In her mind, the analytical penetration into the quote, essence of the phenomenon completely overrode any moral aversion to the imagery of words. Setting her glass down, she stated, quote, espionage or surveillance itself isn't the issue. Because the comprehensive act of gathering and analyzing information to establish a basis for any action can always be framed that way, depending on the need. I don't see it as something to inherently feel repulsed by. Confronted by her friend's flawless logic, which stripped away all emotion and reduced the phenomenon to the value-neutral act of data collection and analysis, Saya relaxed her tense shoulders slightly. She let out a hollow chuckle and nodded. Wow, context really is everything. Soo-in's gaze drifted slightly upward, past Sia, as if tracking an invisible orbital trajectory outside the window. A subtle edge crept into her dry voice. But the dissonance I'm sensing is this. Cobalt must be well aware that drones could be utilized to eliminate scarabs, which are currently a global crisis, without any human casualties. Yet looking from the outside, shouldn't a subsidiary of a massive conglomerate like Cobalt, supposedly in the defense industry using drones, at least show the initiative to develop combat drones? The moment she heard those words, Sia's eyes snapped wide open. The clear, altruistic logic that scarabs could be destroyed without human casualties ignited the boiling blood in her veins. Her distinctive, bulldozing drive to smash through and solve problems head-on furiously awakened. Clenching her fists and punching the air, she spoke with a flushed face. Exactly! If they're Cobalt tier, they should be out there blowing those scarabs to pieces like kaboom! Sia's vibrant voice, burning with a new epiphany, echoed in the quiet corner of the student union. Yet, even in the face of that blazing enthusiasm, Soo-in remained emotionally undisturbed. She returned to thoroughly analyzed facts to drive the final nail in the coffin. So, I did some digging on the university network to try and infer the classified job description. But looking at the publicly available information on Raptor Dynamics, I don't see those characteristics. For instance, swarm drone-based real-time 3D terrain rendering, AI analysis of crowd behavior patterns with early warning algorithms for anomalies, broad-spectrum facial recognition systems fusing optical, infrared, and thermal imaging across multiple lenses, medium-altitude long-endurance wireless charging relay stations. It seems their primary business interest isn't national defense itself, but something else entirely. A chilling catalog of technologies designed to monitor and control humanity with exquisite precision. Listening to that eerie list with her chin resting in her hands, Sia wore a worried expression but pouted soothingly. Still, they might be scouting you to pioneer a brand new division, so you should at least go check it out. Although her lips offered practical advice out of concern for her friend's future, in Sia's mind, a powerful, intuitive warning siren was already blaring wildly. Having learned it the hard way while managing defect rates and hazards on production lines, she was a devout believer in Heinrich's Law, the statistical principle stating that behind every major catastrophe lie 29 minor accidents and 300 near misses sharing the same root cause. To her, these seemingly trivial, superficial facts that Soo-in had pointed out resonated deeply as near-miss anomalies that could not simply be ignored. And within that precarious chill, paradoxically, the tremendous energy and imagination suppressed deep within Sia's core sparked a massive ignition. If Cobalt wasn't making attack drones, if those overwhelming capitalists weren't stepping up while the world was dying, that meant there was a perfectly empty blue ocean for profit generation. The moment she saw that blue ocean, her pupils dilated massively. Her extreme anxiety abruptly mutated into a fierce, burning ecstasy to personally smash the world's problems and deliver salvation. Sia suddenly thrust her upper body across the table, her eyes gleaming. Hey, then why don't we build those attack drones and hunt the scarabs? This is a total niche market. The absurd proposal to personally manufacture world-saving weapons and conquer a niche market popped out as cheerfully as if she were picking a lunch menu. Soo-in, who had been looking at her smartphone until just a moment ago, slowly raised her head. For someone who had fully pivoted to a pure software major, building not just a prototype, but establishing a physical hardware production line from scratch was an entirely different dimension of reality. Forget regular drones, how do you plan to build an attack drone? But there wasn't a speck of doubt on Sea's face. A veteran of the field who thoroughly understood the core principles of material procurement, parts machining, and assembly. She clenched her fist, jabbed at the air, and radiated an explosive energy. We'll figure it out starting now. I'll somehow manage to mill and assemble the drone hardware myself, so you'll build the software with me, right? Confronted with the overclocked heat of Sia, blazing beyond all limits right in front of her, Suin let out a shallow sigh and quietly asked, "Literally a minute ago, you were telling me to go to the Raptor Dynamics interview." Without missing a beat, Sia fired back, completely unapologetic and radiantly cheerful. "I need time to figure out the exact details of how to build it too. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Let's just run it as a two-track strategy for now." Faced with that reckless, dazzling, bulldozer-like momentum, the deep-seated affection within Suin ultimately won out. Instead of ruthlessly shutting down her friend's absurd daydream with a single strike, she quietly left room for compromise. "All right, we'll talk about it again after I go to the interview." It was a Sunday afternoon where a scouting offer from a colossal empire collided with the absurd resolve of two broke, unemployed young women setting out to build a weapon to save the world.